So hey, as I announced, I'm going on a big 10,000 mile TransAmerica coast-to-coast trip and back. What am I doing to my motorcycle to get it ready for this trip? I'll show you right now. Welcome to Urban Monk TV. Okay, so I'm taking a big trip. What's got to happen to get the bike ready for such an endeavor? You know, you don't want to get out there and have problems. Try to get ahead of some of that stuff. This is where having your journal comes in really handy because I know when I last changed my chain. I know when I last changed my oil. I know how many miles are on this tire. And of course I can measure the thickness of the tire. I also know how many miles I get out of tires generally, out of chains generally. I know what my valve tappet clearances were in the past, and I'm checking them again before I go on this trip because they're kind of due about now. Journal's really helpful for stuff like this. So here's the things that I'm going to be doing to get my bike ready for this big trip. My front tire is really quite good, and I know that I get well over 20,000 miles out of these. This one is going to make that trip and then some. It may start getting a little cupped in the middle, which these will do around the maybe 19,000 mile mark, but that doesn't affect it much other than it starts getting noisy. My rear tire is not bad in preparation for this trip, but I am going 10,000 miles. Now, I have gotten over 10,000 miles out of a rear on these Shinko 705s, but they come with about 7.5 millimeter of tread depth, and this thing is down between 5 and 6 millimeters in spots. So with all of my gear packed on here and hot surfaces, because I'm going out into the desert Southwest in the hottest time of the year, so I do expect to have significant tire wear. I should replace this with a absolutely brand new one, and I have one right there, so I am going to put that on. That should get me there and back. One thing I always check when I do an air filter is these clamps. Make sure they're tight where the air box is connected to the throttle bodies. This one's easy to get at. The other one, easy to get at when the fairings are off and the radiator's off, which is the case right now. So I check it, and you know, for whatever reason, sometimes because this whole air box pretty much is connected to the bike by these clamps, that can get moved around sometimes, and if they get loose, then you've got a compromise in the system, and air can leak by, and you end up running lean and getting a hesitation or a backfire. So I just check those every time.
The other thing is I am going on this trip in the hottest part of the year into the deserts of the Southwest, you know, through the Mojave Desert and just some hot places. And so I am going to expect triple-digit temperatures, and I'm going to go through this radiator, get every one of those little bugs out of there. If I have to use a pin, these little bent spots, I'm going to straighten those out with a pin and just make sure I got 100% cooling from my radiator.
And then obviously the other thing I'm going to do is put in fresh coolant. I just use the cheap green stuff, and I change it every 2 years. Just make sure it's safe for aluminum engines. As for fluids, I did change the oil. I'm using the usual Shell Rotella conventional. I will need to change the oil on this trip, and I've got an idea of where I'll do that. The alternative would be to put in a synthetic oil and run it the whole way, but I've never had synthetic oil in this bike, and I am doing a long-term experiment with this bike using only one oil exclusively, a cheap, inexpensive oil that's not intended for motorcycles necessarily, to make this bike just kind of an experiment in life. So I don't want to change from that. As for the oil filter, the recommendation on those is to change it every third oil change, which works out with the frequency that they recommend to about 11,000 miles, and I've got, you know, less than that on this particular oil filter right now, quite a bit less. So anyways, I'm going to leave the oil filter for the entire trip.
Both the clutch and brake fluid have been changed pretty recently and flushed. I do that every 2 years. My brakes are good. They're relatively new. Disc thicknesses are good, both front and rear, so brakes are good.
So another thing that I got to address on this trip, in the middle of this trip will come my 75,000 mile mark, and that is my next valve clearance, valve tappet clearance check interval. So I really want to know what the condition is there before I go on the trip. Because if I'm going to be running out of spec, or even if I am out of spec now, I want to know, and I got to address that. So I've taken the top of the heads apart and I've checked my valve clearances. I know what they are. I know what adjustments I need to make. Not much, frankly. Love the V-Strom. And but I know that I will be in spec for the entirety of my trip, and frankly to the next interval where I have to check it, which is at 90,000 miles. Whew, wow. What about the chain? So the chain that's on there now has been on since 64,000 miles. I'm at 71,000 miles, so there's 7,000 miles on that chain. Actually, it was 64 and some change, so something under 7,000 miles on that chain. And I used the same type of chain that I had used previously, and the last time I did a chain was 40,000 40,000, almost 41,000. So I went from 41,000 to 64,000 on the previous chain, meaning, you know, over 20,000 miles out of a chain. If I only have 6,000, almost 7,000 on it, this chain should be fine for a 10,000 mile trip. I'm going to leave the chain as it is, but I am going to clean it and lubricate it, and on the trip I'm bringing a can of liquid wrench chain and cable lube. I use this stuff pretty much exclusively. It's not expensive, it's available everywhere, and you know, what do? I clean my chain with kerosene, and then I put this on. I put it on when the chain is cold, I let it dry, and about every 500-600 miles, this stuff, and I'm getting over 20,000. One chain I got 30,000 miles out of it, so it's good stuff. Also, my sprockets are lasting a long time. So one of the other things that I'm going to be doing is a video on what I'm doing to pack for this trip. So keep an eye out for that here on Urban Monk TV. That should be coming next before I leave, and I'm leaving in 10 days at this point. So just so you know, I will be giving updates on this trip on the Urban Monk TV Instagram page, at Urban Monk TV, and that's where the live follow along will happen. I'm not going to be posting videos, edited videos from the road. I will do some live stuff with my phone when I do have a good connection, good service. Maybe there'll be a campground here and there where I've got 5G and can come to you live, but I don't know where that's going to be, and I can't really schedule it. But if you subscribe and click the notification bell, you know, perhaps you will know when I go live and have time to hop on and see what I'm up to. So that's about it, guys. Air filter, rear tire, valve clearance checks, new coolant. Everything else my journal says I've already done, or my journal says I will get the life I need out of it. That said, you know, I know my battery's good, and I've purchased that one pretty recently. I've got it on the battery tender, which I have a video on how to install those. Pretty confident that I'm not going to have trouble with my bike, and that's a good thing, because adventures have all kinds of different troubles in them. You just don't want your machine to be the problem. So thanks for watching. Hey, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. Check out my book, Creating Mr. Corton, which is on Amazon, or you can find it on urbanmonktv.com, and subscribe if you want to become an urban monk. Thanks for watching.
If you like motorcycles, custom builds, or just like a good story about a man's 3-year effort to build a tribute to his childhood teacher, get a copy of Creating Mr. Corton. In it, you'll learn how this man changed this man for the better. How this man took this and built this. How these guys became lifelong friends and enthusiasts of motorcycling and craftsmanship. And how the name Urban Monk originated. It's available from Amazon anywhere in the world that Amazon ships, in both paperback and ebook, or you can purchase through a link found on urbanmonktv.com. Get your copy of Creating Mr. Corton today.